The Oklahoma Sooners win the Big 12 tournament. It's NCAA tournament time. Alex Storako joins the show to break it all down.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. It's the Alex Storako Show, and we got big stuff to talk about because the Oklahoma Sooners won the Big 12 tournament, and so we got Alex Storako here to break it all down. That's Josh Helmer. I'm John Williams here on Locked On Sooners. So, Alex, let's talk about Big 12 tournament. The Oklahoma Sooners came into it having just lost the Bedlam Series, got a big win over Oklahoma State in that Sunday affair, and then rattled off 3 impressive victories. So just take us through your big picture takeaways from what Oklahoma did in Oklahoma City this past weekend.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is, talking about like the effectiveness of the OU offense. A lot of people weren't sure if that Sunday game against the Cowgirls was a little bit of a fluke or a flash of what they have in potential. But I think this weekend for the Big 12 tournament, they really kind of showed that dominance in a lot of ways. So that was really just exciting to kind of get to experience. I feel like it was the first time that I really got to see kind of what people have fallen in love with within Oklahoma softball. And it just kind of felt like addictive in a way of just like how exploding they were, how fun they were to watch, and the ability that they have to kind of promote softball without doing that. I feel like this was a really big turning weekend in the fact of everything that we've been talking about leading up to this point. It's like, where's the energy? Why are they doing this? They're not hitting like they should be. They're celebrating and they just kind of feel like they're going through the motions. I did not feel that in the slightest this weekend out at Devon Park for the Big 12 tournament. And so I think that was really exciting. They were able to kind of just settle into the box, but also not as well because they didn't have that high walk count that, we thought was really good, but kind of put them and hindered them when it came to just kind of the long run within that realm. So they were attacking first, second pitch. They were really swinging to be effective and not, a ton of home run swings or anything like that, but they were shooting gap to gap and hitting the holes within a defense. And I think that's what makes this offense just so effective in the way that OU plays and Coach Gasso teaches her team to be. And so I felt like with those pitchers that threw against OU, they never were able to get comfortable. Even within Lolly Gutierrez out of the championship game of Texas, she had 10 strikeouts, but you never felt that within the game. I felt like there was a complete and utter dominance out of OU's offense, which with a 10 strikeout game, you shouldn't really feel that. And so that was really exciting. And they really kind of handled everything that they needed to within Kansas and BYU. I know it was an unexpected opponent in BYU and kind of shocked a lot of people. So that was even fun as well. And really kind of handing it to the Longhorns in the championship game and even out the year series against Texas. So all of it was really cool. It was a very exciting weekend, and I think it's just a glimpse of the greatness that this team is capable of for the postseason.
Alex, two-parter for you. The Sooners across the board in this Big 12 tournament had multi-run first innings in every game. So how important was that offensively for Oklahoma? And then for the pitching side of that equation in the circle, does that allow you to settle in when your offense goes out and plates you a couple?
Yeah, I think, in both ways, you get back to that attack part of it. Especially I'm reflecting a lot on like that Texas championship game. Just hard hit balls put pressure on the defense. And I think Jada really started off the game in that aspect and making, Katie Stewart making that error at first base and rallying around that and continuing to, pass the bat in a effective attack mode way instead of walking and letting the next person do the job. They were effective. They were very concise in how they did it. They saw a minimal amount of pitches, which is what we want right now because you don't want them to get on their heels in a box and really kind of let a pitcher take control. And I felt like Lolly Gutierrez never had control a lot. It still felt like she didn't know what to throw to this offense, even despite her line against the Sooners on Saturday. So I think that is a really big aspect to take away. I love that they're playing with a chip on their shoulder. I think that's huge. And like you mentioned, the pitching, I think Kelly dominated this weekend. May came in and just had just a lights out closing appearance, which I think you'll see more of as we go into postseason. And Kierston Deal really rebounded and was commanding of the zone. It really shut down any kind of choice that an opposing offense could try to attempt to make against the Sooners. And I think that's just another aspect. I think it was a huge statement weekend for the pitching staff. I know a lot of people have doubted the pitching this year. So it was really cool to see just all of the working parts and everyone really come in and just show dominance on all sides of the argument. And so that was really fun to see this weekend. And it was cool to just see them back at a familiar place as well. It was weird for me. It was my first time ever being in formerly Hall of Fame as a fan and everything. So, it was really interesting for me. It was cool and share that different just dynamic between, Love's Field and what that has come to be this season and getting that experience at what is now Devon Park.
Yeah, it was a totally different team in that they just were a much more aggressive, team at the plate from the circle. I felt like, Kierston Deal was attacking the strike zone like with impunity. Like it was just ball after ball after ball was right in the strike zone. Yeah, she threw a few balls, but it didn't seem like very many. And Kelly Maxwell too. I mean, she was just so aggressive early in the counts that allowed her to set up the stuff that she was throwing outside the zone. Is it a complete shift for the entire team? Because we're talking about, okay, the batters, they're hitting, they're swinging at first pitch strikes. They're, getting hits on, 2 strike counts or 0-1 counts, or I think Kinsey had a single on a 2-1 count. I mean, a very, favorable one where a month ago, maybe they would have been taking to try and continue to work the opposing pitcher. So we're seeing it just a more aggressive mentality from this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not quite sure what flipped the switch for them, but whatever happened and whatever was said or did or done, whatever, I'm glad it happened. It feels just like a completely different team and a team that we haven't seen all season. And Coach Gasso loves to emphasize that you should not be peaking until this part of season. And I feel like they're really starting to peak, and what better of time than postseason. And so that's what's really cool to see, kind of the evolution of it. I feel like it was a little bit more abrupt than what we're used to as Sooner fans, of just like not a steady climb. It was just, I literally just felt like a flip was switched. And so I think that's what's exciting. There was not, a big walk that, was a bat slam and excitement. It was the doubles. It was trading spots in those at bats and innings and everything. And when you have that, and I mean, Tiari Jennings is going oppo with a gap to gap kind of shot, that's when you know that your offense is locked in and ready to take in a part of a battle within a battle.
This is probably just media guy talking, right? Got to think big picture. Oklahoma made a statement. For me, it's, I came into this thing. I think a lot of people are this way. I want to see Oklahoma be Oklahoma and come out with an attitude and say, hey, we're sick of losing ball games. We want to go chase a national championship. And I thought we got that type of Oklahoma throughout the duration of the Big 12 tournament. What did you see? What statement, if any, did Oklahoma make?
I think it was just the aspect of, we've talked about like the crack in the armor with a couple of the losses, but I think what's scarier about this team is that they've had a lot of lessons this season that past OU teams have not had within the losses and having to rebound. And so I think the statement that they make is, yes, we're battered maybe within a record, but up until this point, it's a completely new ball game. Everything is wiped clean. And so none of that matters anymore. Now that we're after selection show Sunday and all the seedings and everything, it's completely wiped clean, and none of that matters to this point right now. And so the fact that they're feeling themselves, now is a completely different story than, what we're talking about beginning preseason or even mid-conference kind of debriefs when it comes to talking about the team. And I think that's the scariest part about this team right now is they're playing with the chip on their shoulder. They're in attack mode, and that's the scariest part of, an Oklahoma Sooners softball team.
And they're getting it from a lot of contributors. It's not just your veterans. It's a freshman, multiple freshmen, several freshmen, underclassmen, pitchers as well. We're going to talk about the most outstanding player coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Here with Alex Storako here on Locked On Sooners, weekly with us through the softball season, breaking down everything that happens with Oklahoma softball and around the country. The most outstanding player of the Big 12 tournament, Ella Parker, of surprising. I mean, not surprising because of the way that she played, but surprising that it wasn't a TRA Jennings or a Jada Coleman or a Kinsey Hansen or even a Kelly Maxwell, who was fantastic over the weekend. But how impressive is it what Ella Parker's done just on the year in general, and then going 7 for 10 in Big 12 tournament play?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy just to think about it. This is your last and first Big 12 tournament. So taking that in consideration, you're facing 2 out of 3 teams you previously lost to. And so for her to hit 700, put pressure on the defense and find ways to make things work, I think was massive. She just keeps contributing in a really big way. Like you said, it's not the veterans that are always getting the job done. I think her and Cassidy Pickering have done just a phenomenal job at fitting into this lineup any way, shape, or form that they can. And they really kind of make themselves heard. And that's why you see Ella Parker in the national race for Freshman of the Year. And I think she's one of the best candidates, quite literally. And I think anyone who has watched her this season completely agrees with any of that. And so she's just so fun. She's like, there's no cockiness to her. She's just happy to be there and playing the game that she loves. And like just seeing that out of a player, especially a young player, not putting any pressure on herself. I love to see that. It gives me kind of just like a calmness seeing that in the lineup from such a young player. And so I'm really excited to see how she takes her first, postseason run with this team and kind of envelops herself within the lineup even more so than she already has.
Nothing about Ella Parker or Cassidy Pickering makes me think that this moment will be bigger for them or it's different because it's the postseason. They almost seem as freshmen, like at times they're leading the juniors and the seniors. Why have they been able to do that?
I feel like a big part is that expectation that might fall on the 10 seniors that are playing. There's that, emotional aspect of this is our last year, this is our last whatever. And for her, this is, the first of everything. You don't know any better. And I think that's the best way to play softball a lot of times too. And I think there's no pressure to put up the numbers that you have the previous 4 years that you've won a national championship and a lot of that record-breaking stuff that the senior class has done. I mean, they're the most decorated class ever in NCAA history. And so I think there's that aspect of a pressure and expectation where it seems like they're underperforming in some ways. And so I think that's where she gets her freeness in the box and just performing and playing this game. She's having so much fun. There's always a smile on her face. I've never seen her pout or show some kind of like negative emotion. Like, I think that's something that's so infectious about her. And I think honestly, with her steadiness in that aspect and mentality, the upperclassmen I feel like are feeding off of like that fresh in this postseason run, and know that, like, hey, she's going to get it done, and we can too. I think that's another aspect that she brings and has in this lineup.
I want to go back to Nicole May just for a minute, because we hadn't seen much of her recently. And at times what we had seen hadn't been the Nicole May that we'd grown accustomed to. Someone who'd been really, really good and solid. And, in 2023 was fantastic. I mean, she was one of the best pitchers in the country. How important was it for her, for the team, for Patty Gasso to get that inning in 2/3 and just be absolutely dominant against Texas in the Big 12 tourney final?
Yeah, I think it was huge. I think her and Kelly pair up for a great pitching duo, especially when it comes to an offense as potent as Texas. She really came in a clutch moment and really dominated, and I love seeing that. I thought last weekend against Oklahoma State, she did really well. There was a couple pitches that didn't go her way, and I think that's what people focused on a lot. But I think in the last 2 weeks that I've seen her throw, it's been some of her more dominating performances. And to see her kind of get that confidence back, it's just exciting to see, because I know this is like one of her last season here, and she's been so successful for the last 4 years. And I want to see her get those flowers for herself as well. She works so hard and is one, that is stoic and doesn't complain and does her work and gets things done. And to see kind of her getting celebrated was super exciting. And having that moment where, Kelly comes out of the game and Nicole comes in, it just feels like just passing the flowers in another way of, this is Kelly's last year. May has grown up in this program, and this is her last year. There's just something so just like circle completing about it all. And to see Nicole just dominate and use her pitches that she does best is my most exciting part, is the fact of I really haven't seen her throw her stuff her way in a long time. And I get that energy out of her in using that changeup that she's so well known for, using her rise ball effectively, and just being able to complement with her drop ball. I think it's done really well at showing against some really good offenses the last couple of weeks.
How important is it to go into the postseason on a high, feeling good, feeling confident, all those kinds of things? I said on the radio show, I think on Monday, that, to me, if Oklahoma doesn't win the Big 12 tournament championship or doesn't even get to it, to me, Oklahoma was still the national championship favorite. Okay. They've won 3 in a row. They've got all those players that have been a part of doing that. So in a way, I don't want to say that it didn't matter, but I would have still been buying stock in Oklahoma, if that makes sense. But I do think it obviously is beneficial that they went and won the thing. How much does it impact things for Oklahoma? How important was it?
Yeah, I think it just adds to that confidence factor, a little bit of a boost, especially going into this regional. I feel like they got one of maybe a tougher regional, and just a lot of storylines, a lot of narratives heading into this postseason. And that affects you, whether that's physically or emotionally in a lot of ways. And I feel like just getting that win against Texas, and BYU having a little bit of redemption after they took one from them this season too. I think that Texas win was huge and meant a lot more than maybe what ended up it being. Just in a way of like, hey, we're here and you're going to have to, go through us in order to get what we know and love. And so I think that was a really big statement piece, not only for the fan base and the record and everything that goes along with it, but just like, hey, we're still here and you didn't knock us down, but we got right back up. And I think that was a huge part of the win on Saturday, and just taking, obviously a guaranteed piece into the NCAA. Obviously, no one had any doubts about Oklahoma making the NCAA tournament, but it just kind of gives that extra little boost. And, they love those trucker hats that we get after we win one of those. So I think it's just adding to just that confidence piece.
Yeah, so they move, from being number 4 in the nation, they get the number 2 seed going into the tournament. Took advantage of Tennessee losing early in the SEC championship. Obviously, Oklahoma State losing to BYU, giving Oklahoma a little bit of a bump. How did you feel about the seeding? Do you feel like Oklahoma had a better case for number 1 than Texas did, or do you feel like 1 and 2 was settled out pretty much like it should have been?
I feel like they could be interchangeable in a way. I know there's a lot of arguments of, we have more wins and less losses and everything, but I think also too RPI goes into it. And according to the numbers, Texas had a harder schedule. And so I think there's so many different aspects go into the committee picking rhyme and reason. Some of them, there's not a lot of sense making to me. So I feel like I've stopped quite a while ago trying to figure out what the committee is going to do or why they did what they did. I think both teams are just so good. The one thing that I've said was, I'll take the 1 seed, I'll take the 3 seed. I wasn't really confident in a 2 seed just because of the quote unquote 2 seed curse in the past couple of years. But hopefully this is OU's year to break that curse. I'm excited for it. I think what's funny, and I felt like on Sunday getting ready for the selection show, I was just so geared up for it. Like nothing was planned for the day. I was going to sit and listen to everything they had to break down because I've never truly gotten that aspect of shushing everyone in the room and being able to really dive into what the committee has to say. I still came out with questions, and I think that's what's really interesting too, because there's so many, different mixtures. Duke winning both the regular season ACC and the tournament and still being a 10 seed and not being able to host a super is something that I'm like not making sense with, considering they had a 4 RPI. I'm like, what else are we considering and what is being added into it? And so there's so many different aspects that you can dive into and have an excuse for and everything. But I think this will be a really exciting kind of way. I think it adds to just the Oklahoma narrative of having a chip on their shoulder. I know they love playing with that just from experience. And so, and just proving people wrong. And another part of my favorite part of Selection Show Sunday is the reactions. And I think a lot of reactions spoke for themselves in a lot of different teams. And so, it'll be exciting. They'll play with some attitude. I feel that attitude kind of seeping out of them, and just trying to prove the committee wrong in a lot of ways of not giving them that number one.
Well, we can debate 1, 2, where everybody should have been. But the one thing we know is we've got the path set, right? We know what it looks like. So let's discuss what it looks like for Oklahoma and Alex's thoughts next on Locked On Sooners. All even. 2 games apiece, OKC, Dallas, which means we might have 2 more games in OKC, and the perfect place to go figure out where you're going to be seated for OKC Dallas. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. The Gametime app's awesome. It's the premier way to buy your tickets. The reason being, you can see what your seat's view looks like, which, look, if you're a sports fanatic, you know this by now. You want to know what the view from the seat looks like. The Gametime app offers that ability to look right at what you're going to be looking at. So the Gametime app, it's awesome. Download it today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
So the Oklahoma Sooners, the number 2 seed, have a pretty intriguing little bracket that they're going to deal with in the Norman Regional. So, Alex, what are your thoughts on what Oklahoma is going to have to face this weekend in Norman?
I think it's kind of a tricky regional. I'm going to live and die by the fact of I think Love's Field is going to play a huge factor in this regional. Boston University is a team that has been playing very, very well. They have a great pitching staff and they have, great defense. I think they're tied with Oklahoma with a 980 fielding percentage. So that's huge as well. But coming from a small conference, smaller area, going to have to deal with that Loves Field atmosphere. They're playing in one of the 7 wonders of the of the softball world, and having to navigate the Sooner fans and everything. I think it'll be a little bit of a shock factor to Boston, even though they've been playing very, very well. I think they only have 4 losses on the year. I think that'll be a big aspect for them. Cleveland State, I think another team that'll have to play with that atmosphere change. And I think the big one, too, is going to be Oregon. There's a lot of narratives that play into Oregon coming to Norman, whether that's from Coach Lombardi being here for so long, Sid Romero's on staff, and Alyssa Brito transferred from Oregon a couple of years ago. There's that come into it. Oregon is maybe middle of the pack, but they're still a very experienced team. They have a good staff upon them, and I think they're going to cause some headaches for the Sooners in some way, shape, or form. It's going to happen. I think it's going to be just an interesting navigating it all. And it's one of the few regionals that don't really follow that 400-mile radius rule for a regional. So those are always interesting to me as well. But I'm excited about this regional. And then just what made me laugh as well is the narrative of who the pairing was for a 15 seed. And lo and behold, it was a Tallahassee regional matching up with a potential of Florida State for a super. It made me laugh. And I think Florida State also is one of those that has a really tricky regional as well. So that could be just really fun to just watch into as well.
Yeah, Florida State's the 15. So if you don't know that, Sooner fans listening, following along, OU the 2, Florida State the 15. So if it goes according to form in the Supers, number 2 Oklahoma, number 15 Florida State. Auburn, UCF, you think potentially problematic, you said, for Florida State?
Yeah, I do. I think UCF's a feisty kind of team. They had some troubles for Oklahoma to face down in Orlando in some weird games, whether that was really low scoring or really high scoring. I think Maddie Penta at Auburn has done such a good job. She's a seasoned vet in the circle in the SEC that's going to, obviously take their losses here and there. And so I think that's another going to be a tricky regional in itself. And I think there's a lot of fun ones around the country that'll be really cool to just watch. Regionals is always one of my favorite weekends of the year. So that's going to be just super fun to really just dive into. And I hope everyone's, getting ready in their brackets and picking the wins and losses and the upsets.
So who do you think's got the toughest region?
I don't know. I've tried to really dive into it and see. I think Tennessee has an interesting regional with Virginia, who's been hot. Miami of Ohio, that's been the talk of the town with obviously all of their offense. Tennessee in itself has such a great pitching staff as well, and can put together a lot of just really great offense as well. I think another big one is going to be the Oklahoma State regional. They have Kentucky coming to them in SEC. They have Michigan coming to Stillwater, so that'll be interesting. So I'm excited to see that one. I think an upset watch can be an Arkansas regional as well. I think Louisiana could be an upset regional, and Florida has another tough one too. So the field is really, really interesting this year, and I'm excited. Another one is Duke. Duke is a 10 seed, got dropped all the way to the 10 seed, which I couldn't believe. But they are getting a hot Utah team, as well as the South Carolina, who has a feisty kind of pitching staff and really kind of got gritty within the SEC tournament, which was fun to watch as well. So it's really across the board everywhere. And I think that is just what makes softball so much fun. There's so much, I think the word of the year this year has been parity. There's been so much parity and wins and losses that kind of are shocking to a lot of people. And in the way it'll all play out, I'm excited that I'm watching from the couch and the stands this year, because there's a lot that's going to go down, I feel like.
Did Duke get a raw deal in your mind? Because that seemed to be the largest and loudest gripe.
Yes, and I'm gonna put it that way. I think they really showed out. I think they got hurt in the fact of Clemson and Florida State had a down year, but I still found it interesting that Florida State wasn't too far behind them in a regional host. So it really was confusing for myself to kind of figure out why they got jumped down to a 10, because how do you give a team who won their conference and their conference tournament such a low seed and not the ability to host a super? But then I look at the top 8 and I'm like, who do you switch out of that too? So I think that's a big one. I think they, in my mind, probably should have gotten an 8 seed. I think Stanford has been here and there. That's a big one. LSU didn't finish off super strong, but they had a lot of fight as well in the SEC tournament. There's really so many different combinations that I'm glad that I'm not on the committee and hearing all the complaints and all of that and not making those decisions. But I think that's what adds to the fun of it. Selection show is always so fun, and I was thankful that at OU you didn't really have to take a lot of guessing time. But the 4 years prior, it was always kind of across your finger: are we hosting? Are we not? Where are we being sent? And that was its own chaos as well.
It's almost like they need to maybe adapt things a little bit to where if you win your conference, you should be rewarded for that, especially a conference like the ACC that has some strong teams in it. You mentioned Florida State and Clemson, but Virginia Tech has been really good this year. So it's
Virginia
not like
well,
they won a conference that was, weak. I mean, they played really well all year long. They gave Oklahoma a tough game, first week of the season as well. So it's not like this is a bad team. So I think, whoever ends up having to host them for a super regional is not going to be too pleased about that either, because that's going to be a team looking to pay some people back for getting dropped to that 10 seed. I think if we're talking upset potential, I really, really like Texas State. I know Texas A&M has been really good this year, but that Texas State team is pretty good, and they have some upset potential as well. I think that Missouri regional is also really, really fascinating too, because you look at Missouri, you got Washington, Indiana, and Omaha, and we know Indiana can play a little bit. Even though they lost Taryn Kern, they still got some talent on that roster.
Absolutely. And I think another big shock to me was the Big Ten getting as many teams as they did. They had 4 in the bracket this year. Indiana has been hot as of late. Michigan scored 2 unearned runs against Indiana in the Big Ten tournament to get them that qualifying, as well as Washington being a 2 seed, going to Missouri. I think they'll be a little kind of have a chip on their shoulder in that regard as well. Although when I've gone, I actually went and watched Missouri play LSU this year, and Missouri has a phenomenal staff. They have 2 really good leading just offensive batters in Alex Honnold and another player. Can't remember her name, but like they have a lot of interesting combos that I feel like a lot of people are kind of putting in the back seat. But I think Missouri can go on a really big run, and that's who actually matches up for a super potential with Duke if everything plays out as well. So I think the way that everything has really lined up, I think UCLA, I think the narrative there is quite funny because they get Grand Canyon, San Diego State, who also matched up in their regional last year that UCLA did not make it out of, and they get a Virginia Tech as a 2 seed there, which is not regional, but also a really quality team that gets put in that Los Angeles regional. So there's a lot of interesting I mean, Charlotte goes to Georgia for that regional as well, and you see Liberty there, who upset a LSU team. So there's so much that goes into like all of these games that I don't think that I'll have time to do anything else but like put my eyes on the TV this weekend and constantly refresh my ESPN app, because that's what I feel like I'm going to be doing, watching all this softball this weekend. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. This is, it's one of the most fun weeks of the year from for softball fans from a viewership standpoint. I like the Big Ten getting rewarded in both diamond sports. I feel like the scheduling disadvantages, I like to see if you're going to kind of go out on a limb for a conference, a major conference, then the Big Ten, because of some of those, scheduling disadvantages, I like seeing them get rewarded a little bit. Just in closing for me, Alex, what was the difference for you in terms of viewing the selection show as a fan as compared to like what it's like, or where are we going to go? Like what are the differences player to fan?
I think there's still the oohs and the ahs of all the announcements and seeing where everyone's placed. I think it's just the ability of kind of having someone else do all the film prep and all that practice for kind of throwing you back to a preseason setup of like preparing for 3 other teams for a weekend. And it's interesting because you don't have a hand in it. So it's like, it was weird being hands off and not having to, know where you're going or packing or in last year's regard of just like getting ready for the postseason and who's coming to you. So it brings a different viewership that's really interesting. So I just get excited because the committee, I know, loves the drama. I know a couple of years back they put Oregon in the Texas regional, or vice versa after all of that drama. And so just looking at it all, it makes me laugh every year because I don't think could ever expect it similar to a Oklahoma softball lineup out of Coach Gasso. Like, you never know what's going to happen and be put on the field. So that's a little bit of the combo that I just have in comparison. And so it's cool to be on the outside and to just watch because you just see it growing the game in a lot of ways, in a lot of different just areas of the country, and being able to build such a sport that has provided me so much and just continued to grow.
Yeah, the NCAA may not be doing a lot right, but hey, the way softball is growing, you got to kind of tip your cap to them a little bit because, I mean, since the COVID year, it's just exploded. Plus with the kind of the partnership with ESPN Plus across the country, I think it's helping bring more eyes to the game, which is getting more people in the seats, which is getting more people to become fans. So it's really, really exciting. So, hey, if they're matching teams up in regionals for a little bit more drama, for drama's sake, hey, by all means, because it's storylines that create interest. So keep it up. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and YouTube. So hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex Storako. Follow Josh at Josh on Ref, myself at John 9 Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners. But until next time, she's Alex, he's Josh, I'm John. Boomer
Sooner.